Anybody wishes to speak to the committee? And I gotta have Supervisor Augustine out of here by 6. So I'm gonna roll along. Administrators report.
As you saw in the personnel policy when this was first printed out, we did not have the jail cook who had resigned. That is actually farther down into the agenda. We'll have to ask for approval for that to be filled. But I also wanted to make the committee aware now that it is out in public. We have put Lieutenant Eric Pishak on paid administrative leave. So he will be on leave until his situation is resolved. The sheriff will be, because it is a lieutenant and a management position, the sheriff will be appointing a temporary lieutenant position to fill the administrative duties of that position. But once the situation is resolved with Lieutenant Pishak, if there is a vacancy, which I'm going to assume there will be, then we would be coming back to the committee asking for approval to fill the position.
How does paid administrative leave work?
That means that you don't come to work, but you are paid.
Yes, I get that part, but is that how long does that go on for? Is that able to go on for a day, week, month?
It can go on for as long as we deem it to happen, because if it's a legal issue, it's best for us from a legal standpoint to continue to pay our employee until that legal situation has been resolved. Once then there is a legal situation that is resolved, then we can take whatever action we deem necessary. But to do it prior, you open yourself up to legal liability.
How long do we anticipate that could go on for quite an extended period of time, correct?
It could. I don't think it will, but again, if I can predict, then I would instead play the lottery.
Questions, Administrator? All right.
Can you use like vacation and that could be used?
We can't
do that.
We can't force them to do that.
We haven't set executive committee. If it's still not resolved by next month, can certainly take it up next month.
Correct. Yes. Depending on what the issue is. And again, that would be, if that's something that were to happen, we would want, because that is a personnel matter, we would then want to put that into closed session. But yes, when we talked about as to what type of action to take, that would be important to then have our corporation counsel talk about what may be the legal impacts if you're taking some type of action prior to a resolution.
And so we're paying somebody else to do the position, or will be.
Correct.
Same time. And I assume that's somebody within the department then?
Correct.
All right. Next on your report?
You have, and when we had talked last month, I had talked about performance measures for departments. I was just giving you a sampling of different statistics and performance measures that I review from a variety of different departments. And my thought was, since we were talking about both remote work as well as just productivity, I was just giving some examples. The first page is from land and water. This is zoning. The next couple are just some statistics from the Parks Department. The other one is tourism impacts. The next two are basically HR related that come through my office. Then the next one is veteran services that sends out. And then the last one is statistics that are reported to the state for child support. So I just wanted to give a brief kind of example of the different things there. And with the committee's indulgence, I guess what I would like to do for 23 is, we know that in the personnel policy that departments are no longer required to present annual reports to the county board. And part of the reason why is because we have 24 departments. If we were to do 24, that would be 2 presentations a year to the county board. And I'm not sure that that is something from a time standpoint that the board wants to do. But what we could do as an alternative is I could work with departments to create annual reports that are submitted to the board, not necessarily presented. So therefore, or could be presented to their standing committees. So that way, as standing committees or as county board of supervisors as a whole, you can have a better idea as to what types of work is being done within those departments and how that compares over a period of time.
What's the committee's desire?
What about if they give a report to the committees?
An annual report, I'm fine with that. I guess I would like to work with the departments to do a structure, because depending on the department, there's at times different structures as to how that's done. I've seen a number of departments where all they do is they give statistics from last year. So are those good numbers or are those bad numbers? You have no way to know because there's no other numbers to compare it to or to give any context. And so I am all in favor of working with the departments to provide annual reports to their standing committees. I'm fine with that as well. I just think that this would be a good way for committees and board members to have a good understanding as to the work, the amount of work, and how we compare to others.
Any other thoughts?
Would you like me to move on? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I was ready.
I just feel there should be some communication somewhere that, so we kind of know what's going on.
I like that idea. Standing committees get a report if they put in
And
to
I,
the full county board, just pack it into a county board packet at
Correct.
that time that we can do this.
right, and I do believe that there are some departments that already do this, but there are some that don't. And so we can have it where it just gives a more complete picture for some of those departments that, depending on your committee, you may not see on a regular basis.
Sounds good. All right, going back on the lieutenant position.
Yes, sir.
To circle around again. I'm assuming then if that's being covered, the duties from within the department, I'm assuming that ultimately comes out on overtime, right? I mean, in the end, because you have to
Not
cover
necessarily.
that additionally.
I'm
I mean,
going,
where does that work go? It doesn't disappear.
no, and I don't want to speak for the sheriff, but I'm going to throw in a
Work
little
goes
bit
to
here.
someone, right?
Is there will probably be some overtime, but I don't know that there will be 40 hours a week of overtime, because I think what will happen, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sheriff, is that the sheriff will designate a person to kind of take on some of those duties and do some reallocation of duties, and from there kind of move forward for this interim period. Is that a fair statement?
Right, so I mean, we're gonna be dispersing that workload, but I mean, if there's things that are gonna be coming in after hours or outside the normal, we gotta respect, those hours, because again, they're not salary, they're in a temporary
Right.
position that's still 80 hours per pay period. But then we also have that cross train, so if they're coming out of patrol, we'll utilize that cross train to backfill patrol to try to minimize the overtime there. So again, it's a matter of just spreading the staff around in different directions to absorb that overtime. But it's not going to be putting them into the environment of a salaried person where they're just absorbing the night calls and things like that. That's all gonna have to be dispersed.
Right, so it's gonna come out in overtime.
Yeah.
basically.
Right, just not an hour for hour standpoint.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Okay,
As for satisfaction surveys, we had talked also last month about potential satisfaction surveys, especially for the Veteran Service Office. I wanted to give you a copy of a satisfaction survey that was sent out from the Wapaka Veteran Service Office, Wapaka. But yes, and then there are also, what I've done on the second page are here are some other questions that we could possibly do and put together. Some of those are similar to the public satisfaction survey we did for the county as a whole, but we can make it more specific to the Veteran Service Office. And some of those are other questions as well. If it please the committee, I can, if there are specific questions that you want to have included in there, I can do that, whether they're listed here or otherwise. But then what I could do is I can work with UW Extension and start to have that survey put together and then sent out.
This was good. Okay.
Just on this, on the second page,
Sure.
toward the bottom, can we ask this question? Are you male or female?
Absolutely, because they could, yes. And I know that they did the other one, but I guess you can ask and they can choose not to answer. That's the great thing about a survey. Yeah, little humor there. I knew where that was coming, Supervisor Rogers.
So where does this survey go out on?
Well, then, the thought was, and I would talk with UW Extension, there's a couple different cohorts that I'd be looking at. One, we could look at current open case files and folks that we have provided services to. And then second, what we could do is talk to Legion commanders and either do it at a Legion meeting and have them fill something out right there and collect it, or do it in such a respect that could we get names and addresses, or could they, if they're worried about privacy, if they could provide names and addresses on envelopes, which we would pay for, we could then send out surveys as well. Because I think we need to do both. One is the veterans and families that we already provide service to, but then also the veteran community in general. Unless there is some disagreement.
I guess I was just concerned if we're gonna put it on, Facebook or something, there's probably some of these people don't even use it.
Correct, and that's why, to me, and that's kind of what we did with the public survey, is there's no perfect way,
I know.
but I think at least for the most part, we can try to do as much as we can. If we have our own customers, then we have that information and we can target them. And then from the Legion standpoint, they know their own members. And so then we can send stuff out to them. The part that we can't necessarily do is those veterans that are not part of any Legion and therefore are to a certain degree unidentified. But we have to try, this is probably the best methodology.
Okay. Any other questions on that?
I got a question, kind of with that public survey that you did.
Uh-huh.
I know, Matt, in your article this week, you have something that you're gonna have an article in the paper. Is that coming from that survey? Because I know it was one of the questions or answers was they didn't have any information from our county administrator. So is that some of that's coming from that, or? Well,
Actually, the sheriff and I, and he can speak for himself, the sheriff and I have been talking about this actually prior to that, in that, and I think we've said this before, Kewaunee County doesn't have a radio station. It doesn't have a television station. You can argue amongst yourselves whether you believe it has a newspaper. But in that same respect, what we do know, at least from that survey, is that the column that the sheriff's been doing is where a number of people get their information from on a weekly basis. Now, we also do it through news releases and different things like that, but it's very difficult if you don't have a stable, and I'll call it mainstream media, if you don't have that type of platform, it's difficult to get that information out. So for the sheriff and I, we thought this is one way to not just do the sheriff's department, who's been doing it, he's been doing it for over a decade, but I can do it, other departments can do it, and we can try to get more of that information out to the public. So while it's not that wasn't the reason, it dovetails perfectly.
Good idea.
So,
All right, we move ahead with that. Personnel policy, anything more in the report?
no, sir,
Can
thank
I,
you.
can I just ask one question about the packet
Sure.
with all the?
Yep.
The last page, I'm assuming that those are human service statistics,
These are child support statistics.
child support.
And this is only one of 4 other statistics that they do. They do primary payments, they do paternity establishment, they do arrearage payments. And what is interesting is they get that information every month. And what I had done in the past is kind of go and put it amongst, similar to our pay plan. Here's our counties that we usually do. So then if we ever want to tie work performance and workload to what we pay compared to where we make our comparisons from a pay standpoint, then this helps to give us a clearer picture.
According, some of these here, the sanitary system report is 2020.
Uh-huh.
It has to be current, more current than what it is here is. Right?
Well, and I was just giving examples. So is there one for the end of 2021? Yeah, there is. And are there ones back from 19? Sure.
Okay, because they're doing it continuously, aren't they?
Well, yes, and what I'm saying is, so at the end of the year, this is the end of the year kind of statistics for that year. And Glenn Sellner, the previous zoning administrator, used to do this as well. Now with at Land and Water, they've continued this.
Anything else? Supervisor Yonke?
What's happening with Jennifer Gonzalez's position?
Well, I know that at least from this standpoint is that the committee had approved the recruiting of the position. But I also know that there may be some, what's the right word? Some discussion as to what we may or may not want to do with that with regards to KCDC. So I kind of held off until November 1st and the board has approved the budget, because then once the board has approved the budget, then to me, that's a definite solid answer as to how to move forward. And if nothing changes after November 1st, then I plan to put out an ad and recruit for the position.
For the budget, your proposed budget, obviously, when that comes forward, that will include the pay scale that the executive committee approved, the 3% plus steps. So
Yes.
Will all be adjusted.
Yeah, what will happen is that the adjustment will go in front of finance, that here is the dollars that would be taken out of the salary and wages line. And then the finance committee would determine where that money would be reallocated.
And I suppose if they have any other changes they wish to see as well.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions? We're good. Move on to personnel policy items, remote work policy. So we beat this around for a long time without much conclusion. I appreciate all the time and effort Mr. Geffel put into this. What he came up with. However, I don't like it. I agree with it in some, but I do like what he did come up with. And his, does everybody have this in front of them? You received copies. So if you go to the remote work policy, we were trying to clarify that employees are to be at work. That was the desire of the committee. So if you were to go to that under participation point 2, where it says, remote work is an arrangement for an authorized employee to perform assigned work during regularly scheduled work hours from a location that is not the employee's usual place of business. So on that first line, strike everything up to the word employee. Remote work is an arrangement for an authorized. So start the sentence there, okay? And then put employees are to perform assigned work during regularly scheduled work hours from, and then strike a location that is not, and then continue the employee's usual place of business. So we could simply adopt a resolution that says employees are to perform assigned work during regularly scheduled work hours from the employee's usual place of business. And that is very clear because, for example, we know that the highway department, their regular place of business is oftentimes a truck. The sheriff's department, their regular place of business is typically going to be a squad car. Mr. Loining's place of business, could be from, multiple locations. But every employee knows what their regular place of business is. And if you really want to add to it, I don't think we need to, but you could add a line that if any clarification is needed, it will be granted by executive committee. So we could make it as simple if somebody wanted to make the motion that simply state employees are to perform assigned work during regularly scheduled work hours from the employee's usual place of business.
The rest of it, you're okay with?
No.
That would be it.
That's it.
Oh, that's it.
That's the policy. That's the remote work policy. Employees are to perform assigned work during regularly scheduled hours from the employee's usual place of business.
So for clarification, the remote work policy would be that the county's position is that there is no remote work that's authorized by
Executive committee. Yeah. I mean, as far as people that need to work in other places, I mean, that's covered. Highway employees, sheriff's department, those are covered. I mean, they have a regular place of business that is, in different locations. And any clarification that would be, and as far as, we have flex time. I was thinking about that. We do have flex time. We have sick days. We have, the county shouldn't be paying people to work if they're, while they're caring for a sick child. Is that fair to the town? We have flex time, we have sick days. That's my thought. What does the committee wish? But that would be the remote work policy, is that people work when they work.
Are we keeping the rest of the
No,
verbiage?
no, that's it. That's the remote work policy that I would propose is, and under remote work policy, we have employees are to perform assigned work during regularly scheduled hours from the employee's usual place of business. That's it. That's the whole thing.
That's the whole line.
That's it.
I don't know that we have to call it a remote
And
work
then-
policy because there is no remote work address there.
Okay. So call it work policy. Call it what you want. It's
Whatever you want. I
the
don't know if we
language is.
need any policy at all then. By doing that, also remove the ability for human services to.
No, because we have a separate item for that. Human services is already approved. I mean, so if we need to, we could say any exceptions will be approved by the executive committee. Any exceptions will be approved as needed by executive committee. Because we've already done it for human services for those select individuals. And Mr. Loining, Corporation Council, Highway Department, they would all be covered by usual place of business.
So you're talking like land and water, if they go to a farm visit.
That's their regular place of business. That's their usual place of business, is a farm field. At that point, isn't it?
Makes sense.
Pretty straightforward.
Parks is the whole county.
Parks, I don't know where Dave's usual place of business is.
The only question that I have, Mr. Chair, is, and I understand the philosophy of it. I do. The question comes down to what I'll call the one-offs. And again, I'll give an example of Dave at Parks. is if it's Winter Park, does that mean that Jen Salentine has to drive in from her home to work at the office to answer social media requests regarding Winter Park? Because her home is not her normal county place of business, yet that work is needing to be done to answer those questions and requests. And I understand the philosophical part, I understand, but if from the philosophical part, it therefore doesn't necessarily allow for the flexibility of the one-offs.
I think that what I proposed is very clear, and an additional line that said any clarification or exceptions that are needed would be granted by executive committee would further clarify that then.
How do we,
I mean, somehow we managed this for 150 years before COVID, and it wasn't difficult for people to figure out. I don't know why it would be hard to figure out now.
how do we verify that for employees? In order to be responsive to needs as they arise, if the committee that's making those decisions meets once a month.
What are they doing right now?
If there's a call in, say the highway department, and there's an emergency call in, they come in and do it. They come in and put a sign up, they come in and do, fix a road, a hole or whatever. That's part of their job.
You know, if we're doing it, if we're doing it now, then we don't even need this period.
Right.
Right.
They know how to do their jobs. These aren't children. I mean, give these employees a
I
little
mean,
credit.
we were doing this long before COVID showed up. And I'm just sick and tired of the word COVID already. I don't know about you, Dan, but I'm sick and tired of hearing that damn word because
And some people got
it's
elected.
nothing
but,
but
you
an
know,
excuse.
some people got elected because of that, you know.
Yeah. You got a point. They
If I
spent
may-
their time in the basement, got elected.
If I may, Supervisor Massler, I agree with you that has been, but in that same respect, there has been what I would call unofficial remote work for years.
It's certainly, we've been doing it. It's just that we never looked at it before.
Mr. Whiting, did you have a question or a concern?
Just a question. So many of our departments are small, two
Mhm.
people. Scheduled vacation, somebody's in Mexico on vacation, and then the other employee gets sick. They have the ability to do their work from home as they're sick, but you know, if with this policy, they take a sick day, that means that office is closed for the day.
I think it's as simple as, you know, let's just, I mean, seems to me we're going back to the original suggestion, we just not do anything. And I guess if there's need for clarification at any point, you know, they could come to the executive committee and we'll work that out.
No, I think we're making it too,
We're making it hard.
we relied in the past on the department heads and administrators. We'll kick it up to the executive committee. I think for important issues, yes, it has to come to executive. But why don't we let our department heads and our administrator work it out between themselves, and when it's really important?
Because we've had department heads that have been working remotely for 4 days.
And this didn't
I
happen from
understand that.
somebody working 1 day from home.
No,
This ended up because somebody was working 3-4 days from home.
this got here because
No, I
it became an
understand that. I
important issue.
understand that.
Correct. Right.
But if that's the case, then that situation needs to come before executive. But I mean,
Right.
I honestly believe that department heads and the problem comes around where you have a one-person department. Or even a two-person department that's got no person in there under them, like we've got a couple of those right now.
Scott, what did it look like pre-COVID? Did people ask you, hey, can I come in 4 hours late, work from home? Did we have this stuff, kind of some of this stuff pre-COVID, or did you say, no, use your personal time, this is the way it is? I mean, did we have a little bit of this before? And
Of course, we had a little bit of this
Fine, and-
before, because and I think what has happened is, well, I'll first answer the question and do it otherwise. Yes, unofficially, yes, there was remote work. As as Mr. Depo has said and others, there are times or opportunities where, from a practicality standpoint, it would be better to work at a coffee shop or wherever that is non-county and still be able to do work. Or from like with the park standpoint, it is easier for Jen to be working from her home to do that social media stuff, and then she can come in late on a Monday. But from a remote working, yes, it's flex, but it's also remote. And so that had always been the issue. That had always kind of happened, and there was never the issue. And I think what the real issue is, and I think this is where we got off track, is that I think the real issue, and correct me if I'm wrong, the real issue is about offices being closed and not accessible to the public.
That's not the only issue. No. I mean, there's an expectation. Committee's made it very clear. When you come to work, you come to work. And we're not talking about rare exceptions where somebody has a reason to be working elsewhere. So I think if we do nothing, the position of the board is clear. If there's a need for clarification, we'll take it up. If there's a concern, people can come before this committee. Leave it at that. All right. Approval to fill vacancies.
Yes, Mr. Chair. With the adoption of a hiring freeze policy, there are a number of positions that are currently vacant and therefore need approval to fill. While we do have a succession plan for the Human Services Director position, it is currently vacant. And so therefore, I would ask for approval that we be allowed to fill the Human Services Director position. Again, that is being planned to be done in January, but I want to follow the policy and therefore am asking approval to fill the Human Services Director position.
Do I have a motion?
So
Supervisor Massler, second by Supervisor Rondon. Do we have further discussion on that? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
As for administrative assistant, we had done recruitment and had done interviews. We did not like the choice of candidates, so we want to repost that position. But again, it is open, and so therefore we are asking for approval to fill the administrative assistant position in the Veteran Service Office.
And we are looking to make that a full-time position again.
Correct.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Rondon. So we don't have any desire to consider whether we need to stay with a full-time position. I mean, there are counties that are larger than ours that have one-person departments even.
Yeah.
what is their company?
One person.
Can that-
More veterans, or it'd have to be they're much larger.
Can that department utilize the personnel in either the treasurer's office or the clerk's office?
Mr. Felt,
I think that would depend on if you're wanting strictly administrative duties. As for the workload of the treasurer's office, I think we would have to have that conversation with the treasurer, and the workload for the administrative assistant and the clerk, we'd have to have the conversation with the clerk.
Are there other offices that we could draw assistance on?
Again, it would depend on what are the duties that we want to have happen. If we're wanting it to be kind of from a greeting and checking in of veterans for appointments and the like, there's a number of different things that can be done that could possibly be done first through the ADRC, since they're right there. What we're still even looking for, and I want to, and as part of the 2023 budget, look at space planning. What we could possibly do is see if maybe the Veteran Service Office is relocated down by Human Services and kind of be a subset of Human Services.
so should we be looking at this? Obviously, once you hire people, you got them. Well, it's up to you. I mean, it's up to the committee. I mean, I feel like I'd like more information before we went ahead and filled it. Does that, I mean, can you provide us with more information? Can you, is this urgent? Are we able to get by till next month?
I think you can get by till next month. Then if we're going to, and I guess it would matter what is the pleasure of the committee, because I could therefore request that both the treasurer and the clerk be here and they could tell you themselves what they feel the workloads are of their departments and their staff.
I'd like to know that. I would also like to know, what the workload, I'd like to know from the CVSO what the workload would look like that, this position would be filling. I'd like to hear from him, what his thoughts are, or can we get by with the lower position? And what do other counties, what are they doing with their veterans offices? I mean, what do they look like?
The vast majority, from my understanding it's not comprehensive, but most CVSO offices have at least one full-time administrative support position, even if it's just the support position and the CVSO.
I'll rescind my motion that next month.
I'll remove the second.
It just seems like it's
Makes sense.
well, we obviously have to find 5.5 positions, and so any opportunity to consider, we should always be striving for efficiency no matter what. At the same time, obviously, we want to make sure that we're not reducing services to our veterans. Certainly don't want to get into that situation either, but it's time to ask questions. All right, moving on.
Next, and do we still have an opening for a jailer dispatcher?
Right, so this is actually remaining position from Mr. Solomon going back to early summer. So this is before any of the freezes. So the current process we're in is to fill that one. So that is a current existing position that has been vacant because of the resignation of the deputy. So that one has to be filled. Then there's the conversation of moving forward.
Which we'll get further down, and that we are already through part of that process. But again, technically, because it hasn't been filled, it is therefore vacant, and therefore we need to have approval, even if both interviews were done and we knew who we wanted. It's still a vacant position. We would have to have approval to move forward.
Okay, so we need a person.
Correct. This is a current vacancy.
Current.
Outside of anything we're gonna talk about in the future, this is a current vacancy that's been in existence for about 4 months.
So why has it been in existence that long?
Because that's how long the process takes. We'll have that conversation about our timelines in the next 3-4 years. That's how long it takes from posting to testing to interviewing, this whole thing. That's the problem.
But you have somebody in the system.
We have a group, right? We do an eligibility list. So we've actually got a full day of interviewing coming up on the 26th. So we've got a great listing. And so from that listing, we're gonna pluck one right away to fill this spot. But then we also have what's gonna be budgeted for 23, that then we'll be able to pull from that listing in 23 when there's budgeted funds to start working our way towards that 5, right? But that's part of the conversation further down. So this one is a position currently existing, right? That's currently vacant.
And you have the names. You're
Yes.
just waiting to pull the trigger.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to fill the jailer dispatcher.
Supervisor Augustine, second by Supervisor Supervisor Castellier. Discussion, further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Jail cook.
This is a September 20th, I believe, is when this position had submitted her resignation letter. It's only 10 to 20 hours.
Right, it's part-time.
Part-time, but it is not temporary. It is part-time.
Who's doing the cooking now?
Well, that
We have
brings us to the,
We have jailers doing the cooking right now.
so this is a great question because
Sheriff
this
running
talks
around
about
with an
some of
apron?
the impacts of your decisions to a 24/7 operation. You know, just like your decision to the VA doesn't really, it's not a game changer for daily operations. When we're hung up on having to bring these things forward, we're running 24/7. So instead of paying somebody, bringing them on board and paying them $18 an hour, we still have to run these operations. We're now $47 an hour because we're doing it when we can with on-duty jailers, but we don't have them. We're pulling them off shift. We're pulling them from off-duty time. That's overtime. So we understand sometimes the implications of your decisions. And again, I want to honor them, but understand in a 24/7 operation, we need to have a conversation about how that's going to impact the taxpayers. Because this work has to be done. People have to be in those positions 24/7. So again, that was vacant since September. I'm waiting. I have to wait until this happens to now post to be able to get the person in there. So had we been able to just, you know, hit the ground running and maintain operations, we'd have somebody in there at $18 an hour. So I'm just throwing that out there as an awareness that decisions matter.
Well, we've had it where we weren't able to get them even when it was immediate. We had delays too. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Supervisor Massler, is there a second? Supervisor Romden, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Staff recruitment for new jail facility.
Why don't we do this? Sheriff and Jason, let me choose from as well. So you have the colorful kind of spreadsheet in front of you. So this is the part where we're talking about, and the request will be, is that the sheriff's department and the county can start recruitment for these 5 positions immediately. And the reason why is because of the recruitment time, the lag time for both recruitment and for training. And so the sheet that you have in front of you is kind of a timeline. If you see all the way down at the bottom, I was saying that in July of 2025 that the jail would open. Now, it could possibly be done earlier than that, but just for this scenario, we're going to say that it opens in July. So we need to get then 5 positions. So candidate A and candidate B, that takes right there. I'm putting 4 months only because we kind of started it. But once that's selected, a training period of that for both jail and dispatch takes approximately 5 months. And recruitment with testing, both physical and mental and written and dispatch, that takes a number of months as well. So as you see, we could easily by mid next year have 2 positions already hired. And then actually by the end of 23, we could have 4 positions hired. But there's a caveat. We expect at least 3 retirements coming next year in 23. It could be as many as 4 to 6. And what happens then, and those are in patrol, but what happens is we would promote from within. So those jailer dispatchers would then go to patrol. And now again, we have empty positions in the jail. And so where you see the orange ones are kind of with 2 letters, those are possible retirements. If you see the one where you see a B or you see a G, we also know from a historical standpoint, though, because we hire folks, does not necessarily mean that they stay with us. It's not uncommon that we have of 4 candidates that one decides after having been hired, whether from a scheduling standpoint or a stress standpoint, that this is not for them. Therefore, if you look at this all the way down the line, what you're seeing is roughly about spring of 25, we would have the 18 if we only have 3 retirements and a couple people drop off. If we continue the process, we may have 2 more that would be ready to go by July. But again, I'm assuming that there's going to be additional retirements besides the 3. And if Sheriff or Chief Deputy Vaser want to chime in, I'm just thinking from it seems like 2 years is a long time, but from a recruitment and a training standpoint, it absolutely is not.
So, no, you're absolutely spot on, Scott. So you know, not wanting to kill a bunch of ink cartridges and turn this into a real mess, it is a moving monster. And the thing we have to keep our eyes on is opening date. Because one of the things we talked about early on was this issue of building this building, right? And those are gonna be hard times. Our builders, architects, these people are on a fairly solid timeline. That building's gonna be done. If we don't have our act together on the staffing side of it, I can't occupy that building. That would be a major embarrassment. That would not end well. And so as you're seeing with this timeline, that's if everything goes as planned. And that's with us maintaining a tempo, right? A consistent tempo of opening, hiring. Again, kind of speaking back to this issue of the hiring freeze, we have to be very careful that we don't place impediments in front of ourselves. And that's the concern. So what we have to look at is, let's say we have somebody from investigations patrol, we have some senior staff in the jail dispatch, that there is some cascading that goes on. But if every time that cascading has an impact, we have to put the brakes on, wait for a committee meeting, get the approval, now start it up again. We've got to understand that we need to maintain a certain operational tempo to this hiring process. Because as you're seeing here, that's in a perfect setting. And we all know there will not be a perfect setting, right? We're going to lose people to other agencies. We're going to lose people to the private sector, right? We're going to have people that are going to come up and just say, Matt, you know what, I was thinking about retiring in 2 years. I changed my timeline. Something changed, right? We've got to understand that we're dealing with human decisions and we're trying to base a static plan on a lot of fluid decisions, right? So we're doing the best we can. When we look at this, the template or the flow of the training, there is some movement that we could, again, throttle this up, but we have to be careful because in the past, we've managed to find the sweet spot. We start to throttle up trainings and let's say we try to condense them, compress them, right? Then what you do is you end up throwing people online that weren't ready. And what happens is they get frustrated and they quit. And now we're going to end up with a higher attrition rate. That attrition rate is also going to impact this. So we've got what we feel is a fairly good tempo of timelines, how long it takes to recruit, how long it takes to train, and then getting them online. And again, if everything works great, you're seeing the outcomes here with the dates. I just want to make sure this committee's on board, that you have the faith that we can, manage this and continue on. Again, we're going to be giving reports all along the way, but we have to be careful not to put roadblocks in front of ourselves and not, what I'm saying? We have the potential here to become our own roadblocks. We have to be careful with that.
I think everyone should have one of these.
And that's that hiring
That's
timeline.
how long it takes from
Yeah.
when we have an opening in order to actually put a person online, and it's about 5 months. And that's without having to come to committee for approval.
5 months to train and about 5 months to recruit because of all the testing and psych eval and everything else. So call it 10 months.
10 months before they're actually on the roll.
Correct.
Do these
Filling a shift.
dispatchers and jailers, do they have to be a certified officer in the state?
So they do not have to be certified law enforcement. That's another piece of this that has to be worked in, right? They don't have to be law enforcement certified. Sometimes we're very fortunate that we get them from, let's say, another agency, or they're coming out of school where they created their own environment. However, they all have to go through jail certifications. There's 2 certifications, right? We have law enforcement certification and jail. If they come to us with law enforcement certification, that's a win for us, because then, of course, we've always said we use them for transports, court, special events, right? That's a win-win for us. But regardless, unless they came from another agency, like we've been robbing from Brown recently, and they've actually done all that for us, then we get them sort of turnkey, right? That's great, but they're not all going to be turnkey. So we are going to have some that are come to us either fresh out of school or maybe from another part of the workforce that they don't have certification. So that's got to be worked into this as well. So we're really trying to plan for a best case scenario. We got a lot of moving parts, and those jail certifications don't run consistently, right? Sometimes TC or Fox Valley will say we're not running a course this semester, not enough people, or whatever it might be, or it's full. So we're fighting a lot of elements we can't control. So again, the message is let's control the things we can control, knowing there's a lot of things we can't control. So let's make sure that we're putting in place the best possible flow for this hiring process, so that when that building's ready, we're ready. Because then the other part of this, not just hiring, but when you get into that last year, that's when we start to do all the, all of this policy training, and that's going to be not all at once. That's going to be, 1s and 2s coming over and trying to get that transitional training to get us ready to occupy that new environment. So lots of stuff going on. I didn't want to drag it on too much.
You and I talked about this a couple of times at our meetings, but under the situation with the hiring freeze, on occasion, we've been approached by other individuals from other municipalities, even other states, that want to move this direction. Under the current situation with the freeze, if someone walked in and said, hey, I'm interested in coming into your department. Person that had actually been trained comes in with certification. We couldn't even hire them.
We'd hire them if we didn't have a position open?
We can't hire them.
We'd hire them though if they
Not
walked in
under
and
the
we didn't have
current
a,
system.
if they walked in and we didn't have a position open?
Right, but so what you're speaking to is, let's say that there is a position open, let's say we're currently going through, and all of a sudden somebody even comes in midpoint, right? And they're like, hey, I want to relocate here, this is where I'm originally from, and I mean, they're a gem. Yeah, and we're not gonna say, hey, sorry, you missed it, why don't you come back in a year? We'll never get it back. So that's just speaking to our ability to be responsive when these opportunities come up. I don't think it changes, it kind of feeds into the freeze. The big issue with the freeze is this timeline. And that if all of a sudden, like right now we're authorized for 5. We know that the ultimate outcome out of all of this, right? When it all cascades and everything washes out, we know that our staff has been authorized 5 additional positions to operate through jail. But within all that, there's the retirements, all the things that are going on. So much like it's much like what happened with the chief deputy retired. We said we're asking for authorization to fill that position along with the cascades. And not saying, okay, now the lieutenant fills the chief deputy, now come back for commission. Now patrol fills lieutenant, come back for commission. Now jailer fills patrol, you know what I'm saying? It creates all those steps. So I guess it comes down to trust that if we know the ultimate outcome is 5 additional positions to the sheriff's department, all that stuff that needs to go on a continual basis, we need to figure out a way to make that fluid and not, maintain the static approach where there's a benchmark at each one. And now we got 30-day delays or 60-day delays if there's not a meeting. So however that might work, or maybe it's gonna be individual authorization from the chair, or maybe it's an emergency meeting, whatever that takes. I'm just letting you know, we do not want to put impediments in front of us.
There's always regular meetings.
When somebody retires, don't they usually give you several months notice, hey, I'm thinking about hanging it up?
The problem is they do, and what we'd like to do is fill those positions before they even leave, so that by the time they leave, we're in the middle of the process of having that person trained. Because remember, we come back to the 5 months of recruitment and 5 months of training, plus the 5 weeks at jail school. If we wait until they're gone before we hire, that's gonna put us, 8 months behind that before we can get somebody going. And our worry is when this gets down to, 2 years or a year or less, that we're not going to be able to get people trained up enough to get enough people to run the new jail.
Supervisor Rondon, you had a question?
Yeah, the 5 new positions, I'm under the impression that it's strictly jailers and dispatchers.
Yeah. Absolutely, because that's ultimately the end result. So even if a lieutenant retires, right, all that stuff that goes on internally, the net outcome is a new jailer dispatcher.
So are these gonna be jailer / dispatcher, or are some gonna be just dispatch only?
No, these are going to be jailer dispatchers, right? When we went around on this whole number of staff, right? When we were coming forward initially, it was like, okay, if we do this, we could have this luxury. But when we refined that number down to what we refined it to, that option went off the window. We don't have it because of the whole combination and dynamics of male-female coverage, right? The whole dynamic of classification, all the things that go on, we're gonna need all boots on the ground. So I'm not gonna have the luxury of saying, okay, somebody called in sick, oh, I can't use that person because they're only dispatcher. I gotta make sure I have absolute fluidity between those staffing. So when we scaled this thing down to the 5, that was one of the casualties, right? That we have to maintain. Now, years down the road, we could have that discussion once we get our feet planted in the building. Okay, is there more efficiencies that can be found? But walking into this project, we've got to have maximum efficiency.
I think that was the intention initially, is that you don't want to have, I have enough dispatchers today, but I don't have enough jailers.
Right.
Right, but the educational requirements for those are high school diploma.
Plus the training
Plus the training.
or the
So
certification.
we're basically talking, high school diploma,
Sure.
$60,000 a year, roughly, right? 30? I mean, I don't understand the complexity of filling these from that point.
The complexity comes down from the training standpoint.
Oh, I get it, there's the training, but I mean, there's certainly, it can't be that tough to find people with nothing more than a high school diploma in this county willing to fill those positions.
Again, and
I mean, if we're having trouble, I mean,
I'm gonna be careful when I say this, is,
recruitment here.
sure, could we fill it? Sure, you can, we get applications all the time. That doesn't necessarily mean that we want those people to be responsible for the safety of their fellow coworkers and other inmates. So could we have applications? Sure. But we also want to make sure that we have quality applications, which is part of the reason why we go through the 3 different testing: one personality, psychological, fitness, as well as the dispatch test itself, a couple written tests, 2 interviews. Then from there, now we also go through the training to make sure that they can handle the stress of what happens when you're getting two different 911 calls and someone's wanting something from master control.
It's a 4-month training program.
5.
Okay, 5 months. All right, what does the committee wish to do?
I would make a motion that we give approval to begin the position recruitment as soon as possible.
How many?
You want a second and we'll do discussion?
Well, I need to clarify what the motion is.
I would, because in February, we're gonna need to basically have 4 individuals as I see it. And it might be 5 if we, if one drops out.
Well, sure, I'll clarify from the budget perspective. So again, the one that we got authorization under 8C is already, within the budget, was an existing position, that's solid. So in the 2023 budget, we have 2 positions budgeted for the first to start of the year, right? Then 2 basically at the 3rd quarter, so the second half of the year. So we're not looking to pile everybody onto the front side of the calendar because of course we wouldn't be able to throttle that through anyhow. So we're going to be starting off with the open position existing, the 2 freshmen. We're running through it as it is. And then once we cycle them through, by the time that money comes into the budget, which is the 3rd quarter, then we'll be able to bring those other 2 in that budget year. The 5th position doesn't kick in until 2024.
And maybe the way to explain the chart in front of you is yellow is recruitment, blue is training. So therefore, while some are training, we're then trying to recruit the next group of folks. And if we're seeing that we have sufficient and it's solid, then we can throttle back the recruitment of additional folks. But again, a lot of that will probably really depend on what we're looking at from a retirement standpoint.
I guess I'm a little confused about looking at this chart. In 2022, A and B is in yellow. For 4 months, that's going to take, you're recruiting for 4 months for 2 positions.
Correct.
Then starting in February of 23 through June of 23, you're training those 2 recruits.
Correct.
After those 2 are trained, then what happens to them?
Concurrently, while those 2 are being trained. I mean, what happens to those 2 that you've trained?
They're fully trained. Are they now full-time employees? Or,
They're full-time
and what are
employees.
they going to be doing
They get put into
if the new jail isn't open?
You have to remember, we're also doing transitional. We're pulling 3 people out for transitional team. So we've got that going on. So yes, we're going to be heavy, right? We don't have the luxury to wait until the jail's ready to say, okay, let's start talking about staffing. So yes, there will be the next 3 years, right? Where we're going to be running heavy staff, but we're also pulling staff to start working on policy, training, all the things for the transition. So we're going to be moving people in and out of the line duties, if you want to say it that way.
And
So,
budgeted for that.
and it's all budgeted. But the big thing is, don't make this, please don't think that, well, we need to wait until the jail's, ready to open before we start talking staffing. This is a timeline that when that jail opens, we're going to be able to make the move. Because again, we do not want to have that jail sitting empty while we're spinning around trying to get up to staffing. We've got to think forward on that.
I disagree with the assertion that somehow we've got to be ready. I mean, it's going to be somehow a terrible thing if we're not ready to open that jail the day the builder turns over the key. I mean, it happens frequently in facilities that there is a training period and a delay. I mean, I don't understand where the sense of embarrassment comes from if we're not in there the day the contractor gives us the key. I disagree with that assertion.
And it may not be, I'm not saying the day, because again, we won't be. I'll tell you that right now, in 2022, I'll stand here and tell you, we won't be. Because what we've laid out in front of you is the perfect scenario. And we all know that it's not going to follow a perfect scenario. So we will be probably months into this thing. So, I mean, do we want to let it sit for a year, 2 years? I've been sheriff for 16 years and we've never been at full staff, right? I'm not talking about trying to raise it 5. For 16 years, we've been just trying to stay above water. Okay, so we see the challenge in front of us. Because for 16 years, I've never even been able to get up to staff. And then we're going to be dealing with the same more retirements, same issue which I'm saying, recruitment as well as attrition, that these people are going to wash out. We know that.
I appreciate that, but at the same time, when these people come online, the county is paying them.
Yes.
I mean, taxpayers are paying them salaries of essentially $60,000 a year plus benefits. I mean, about $80,000 a year. So at the same time, I'm not sure the taxpayer is going to be pleased if we have people on board 6 months a year prior to being needed. 2 years.
I don't think we have a choice.
And again, they're going to be
We have a
needed
choice.
because remember, we're going to be running transitional teams. We're going to be pulling people off. We're
And
gonna be
I'll let you
training
go
up.
this far. They won't be 2 years. Why? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sheriff and Deputy Baser, is let's say we hire 2 people in January 23 and they're all trained and they're trained up by June. I can almost guarantee you that they will not be, that we will not be 2 positions heavy for 2 years. Because within that 2023 year, there will be retirements. So therefore, those retirements, now we filled them. We just haven't waited. We've been proactive, not reactive.
You know there's going to be retirements.
I can speak to that because I've talked with a lot of people. I believe we will have 15 openings before,
How many? I'm sorry. I didn't hear.
15 openings before August of 2025.
15?
There'll be the 5 openings of the new created positions. There's 8 people eligible for retirement. 1 plans on going next November, 2 plan on going January of the following year. I anticipate at least 2 more will go before the jail opens. Of the 8 possible, 5 are gonna go. There could be 8 that go, but I firmly believe 5, conservatively speaking, will go. That's 10 openings. Then, if history tells us anything, we lose more than 1 person a year for the last 10 years. So conservatively speaking, we lose 3 more. It takes us 3 years to open. That's 13 positions. And we've been batting pretty good about 1 in 4 washout lately of people we hire that don't make the training. They either quit on their own or they just can't make the training. A very conservative number there would be 2 that don't make it. I think more than that won't make it, but let's just say 2. So with that number, we have to probably hire 15 people. We haven't had to ever hire since I've been at the sheriff department nearly that many people in 2.5 years. So just to give you an idea, we're going to be hiring more, exponentially more than we ever have in the past.
So I'm sorry, just can you go back a second? When did you think the retirements were going to be?
Next year, they'll start. About the 3rd quarter of next year, and then 2 are telling me they're going to go January the following year. We did ask all of those people to give us enough notice so we can start trying to fill their positions before they go, but they're not going to give that notice too far ahead until they're pretty positive that that's.
Which if you see at the bottom of the chart where you see staff, 13 is what would be full. If you then do it, you go to 14, 15, by the end of 23, you're at 17. You're starting to do training for 18, but you go down just with 3 retirements and 1 washout, you go back down to 15 very quickly.
Okay.
Of which we need to be at 18.
I've been on the sheriff's committee
law committee for 8 years, and what they say happens.
Right, so what's the committee's pleasure?
Well, there was a motion.
Well, it wasn't a finished motion, so if you want to finish that motion or clarify, or if somebody's got one that's clearer that they'd like to make, we can do that.
You know, to put a number on it, I honestly believe that we have to put trust in the department. And the motion I made was for the department to begin hiring the personnel to meet the goal for when the jail opens. Now, we know that it's an influx movement. I honestly believe that the number of Jasons of 15 is an honest number. That is, we're not gonna hire 15.
Is that your motion?
I honestly believe that the motion should be that we are gonna allow the sheriff's department to begin the hiring process that staff this jail. And whatever that number is, if that number is 10 people, if that number is 15 people, that in that period of time, we're gonna have to replace or hire, we're gonna have to do it. Either that or we're gonna come back, we're gonna call special meetings every couple of weeks.
And from a budgetary standpoint, we are only allowed to, if it's at 13 now, from a jail staff standpoint, the maximum that we can have, because the budget had been approved with that, or will be approved with that, the most that you can have is 18. So it's not like we can have 25 in the jail and wait for the retirements. It would be, we can go up to 18. If there's anything higher than 18 jail staff, then that would have to come back to both the executive committee and the finance committee for approval.
I don't have a,
And what is it now, Scott? I'm sorry.
It's currently, if, let's say, full strength from a budgetary standpoint is 13. If you add the 5, that would be 18. So in other words, I think what Supervisor Massler is saying is allow for the recruitment and the recruitment of employees up to the full staffing of that jail. And again, this does not, because what this does also is that does not allow the sheriff to just continue to hire without approval from the HR department.
One more question. You said you were looking at doing possibly 2 now?
So in the 2023 budget, right, starting in January, it's budgeted for 2. So we've got 1 that's existing,
Yeah.
right? Okay, and then we got the 2 that are budgeted in the first of the year, and then the other 2 are budgeted third quarter, so second half of the year. And then in 24, we'll have to have the discussion in the 2024 budget about that 5th position. So the net growth, we talk a lot about, 15 and all this, but I mean, remember, the net growth is 5. It's just that with all the moving parts, instead of talking about adding, we're talking about replacement. It's basically talking about replacing those with that either retired, resigned, washed out, right, with the ultimate net gain for this project of 5.
but there's very possibly going to be overlap for a period of time.
Which,
And have we found the 5 positions that we were going to find? Where, I mean, we've not been given where those are coming from yet.
we have 2 so far. Again, then we were using sales tax as part for another one. We're seeing what may happen in a couple other departments. So again, we have a certain amount of time. For right now, as within the budget, if from reviewing the budget and from within my letter, we're setting aside over $660,000 in this budget to therefore start budgeting for that transition, which is including the staffing.
And you got patrol that will need somebody to step up.
That's the cascading, right? So that's all that internal cascading that's going to go on, again, with the outcome of net 5 at the end. Again, we're going to work towards it because of budgets, but that's sort of we got to keep our eye on the big picture, right? And I do think that, there is an expectation of the public that we are walking and chewing gum at the same time, that we're not just focused on the building and then all of a sudden the doors open, okay, let's start talking staffing. I think they understand the need. I mean, the complexity of the duties The need again to pull folks out for transitional team, yes, we're gonna be heavy in those years because we're gonna be utilizing folks for a lot of different reasons. But the ultimate goal is that we're gonna be effective in occupying that building in a timely manner once we're given the keys.
What is
Right.
it? Are we talking on the point A and B here? What's point B? Authorization to add 2 temporary
That's a
transition
different, that's a
positions.
different.
We didn't get to that yet.
So we're adding, in addition to what we're talking about here, we're talking another 2 positions.
Nope, no, we wouldn't be adding positions, we would be redesignating,
Utilizing existing. positions.
redesignating,
Designating.
correct.
Saves money.
Because we have to have what's called a transitional team, right? This is by basically the recommendation of jail inspector, consultants and architects, that this is how you do things when you build a jail. You take dedicated staff, you pull them from the line, and they focus on policy development, training, oversight as far as the actual structure, making sure that everything's being met. So we've talked about that in our meetings. So they're getting pulled from the existing staff. That's when we talk about being heavy. Yeah, we're gonna be a little bit heavy, but we're gonna be pulling people in different directions to get ready for this building.
You're doing the proactive information, the proactive work of policies and the like, and with that, I don't know if we want to go to B right away without
Well, I need a
resolving
motion,
A.
I need a
It's a
cogent motion and a second on this if we're gonna do something.
I guess before you go to a solid motion, I'm still wondering, you're gonna have by November of 23, 24,
Mhm.
23, you're gonna have 4 new people
Mhm.
recruited and trained
Yes,
as jailer dispatchers.
Possibly.
correct. Yes, that's the
What do
plan.
you mean, maybe? You may not have 4?
That is.
I'm just
that-
assuming
that
it's
is
gonna
the-
be 4.
That is the intent.
Okay, let's say
Yes.
it's 4.
Okay,
Yes.
What are these 4 new people gonna do? Gonna be doing?
We will lose 3 patrol, most likely.
So some of the jailers that are currently will move to patrol, so these would backfill them, that's what you're
Correct.
saying.
That's the theory.
So you're thinking you're gonna lose 3 patrol people before November of 2023?
Shortly after that, by January of 2024, 2 months later.
And again, during 2023, we got to pull that transitional team. So once we get these folks trained, then we're going to be jerking out those more senior. They're going to be serving as transitional team members. So they're going to be busy. They're going to be plugged in on the line.
and I think I understand the concern that you have, Supervisor Robinson, or at least I'm going to try to articulate what I think is the concern, is that we could have 2 or 4 additional jailer dispatchers that are doing the same job as our current jailer dispatchers. So is there really going to even be enough work for these folks? And so are we now staff heavy? And to be completely honest, yes, we will be a little bit staff heavy. And the reason why is we're being proactive, that when the retirements happen, which we are confident that they will, that we can now backfill them and continue to the recruitment and training for those other positions that we will still need to fill to make sure that we are up to full staff when the jail would open in 2025. So
There's no motion. There's
so
no
I
cogent
think
motion.
what Supervisor, and if I can, I think what Supervisor Massler is asking or trying to say from a motion standpoint is that the Sheriff's Department and administration be given the authority to hire up to 18, an additional up to 18 jail staff
Over the period
over the period of
of.
2023 to 2025. And that can ebb and flow depending on retirements, attritions, resignations, and recruitments. Is that a fair assessment as to what you're trying to say,
Yes,
Supervisor Massler?
it is.
I'm not, what is the motion?
We would give the approval to begin position recruitment up to the total of 18 total members by the opening the jail in July of 2025. In the period beginning in November of 2022 until July of 2025. It's basically 18 members between now and then. Knowing that they can't, you gotta understand, we're not putting 18 on
Is there-
right now.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Further discussion? Supervisor?
Well, I guess, we can't do this until after the budget's passed, correct? So could not be November, it would have to be as starting the first of the
Starting
year,
1st of January.
correct?
Well, we're talking about the recruitment. We want to be able to get through that part that costs us more money, right? But yes, knowing we're not going to incur any budgetary costs for these positions until it's in the budget. So yeah, we don't want to lean forward on this. But again, knowing that we want to get ready for that training to begin, we've got to lean forward on this.
All right. Do you want to make a friendly amendment or not, or an unfriendly? I don't know.
So I want to, no, I guess I would like to see us do this in the third quarter of next year. Start this process. I would make a motion to start this process. I can't lean forward.
I can't, because this motion, have a motion with a second. So if this motion, you'd have to defeat this motion to do that.
It's a question. In the 23 budget, is that where the 2 new people are in the budget? And then hopefully 24, the next wave of recruitment?
So 2 in the first of the year, 2 at the second half of the year, and then that fifth is going to be 2024, right? So that's how we're planning for budgeting. And again, we're not, we've got to lean forward. We can't wait till that third quarter of next year. We're going to blow right past our line. We'll be a year watching that building sitting empty. That's
One other thing we didn't talk about is our ability to train people. Because of putting people on different shifts and stuff, we can really only train 2 people at a time. We used to have a different way of training where we move people around shifts a lot and stuff, and we train them with different trainers. And what we found is for a while, we were losing 50% of the people that we hired. And we had a bunch of committee meetings and we looked at why are we losing these people? And we believed it was a bunch of little things. So we adjusted and we keep people with the same trainer longer. We keep them on a certain schedule, and we can't train more than 2 people in order to accommodate that schedule. If we get forced to train more than 2 people at once, very likely we're going to go back to losing a lot more people than what we've been able to do now.
Could we look at this instead of looking at a 3-year period and look at this coming year? Split it up. After next year, look at it again and say, well, we know for sure now these people are leaving.
But we don't know.
But in a year from now, we'll know better.
We would.
I mean, we know now you start recruiting 2, and then you got budgeted some for the second half of the third quarter. And then next year, look at it again.
So Joe, if you're looking at what's going on from January of 2024, you're seeing is basically approve everything to get us through 2023,
Right.
which is basically 4 positions, right? So, but the problem, I guess, not the problem, but within those 4, that's great, the 4, but understanding that within those 4, we're going to be losing to attrition, to washout and everything else. And all we're seeing is when that happens, we want to get back up on the horse. We don't want to be, sitting on the ground doing nothing, burning time. So I understand what you're saying.
But you're saying, Jason, that right now, there's got to be only 1 at the end of 2023, right?
We will not be 4 people high. If we get authorized 2 people in the first of the year and 2 people halfway through, we will not be 4 high. And in January of 2024, we will be.
Supervisor Rondon, you had a question.
I guess I would probably vote against the motion the way it's been presented, but is there a way we could amend it so that the sheriff's department would be authorized to begin the recruitment and training process based on this schedule? If there's any deviation, you'd have to come back to the committee.
I mean, if you wanted to make that amendment, we can vote on the amendment.
I would like to amend John's motion or offer an amendment to the existing motion that the recruitment and training process for the sheriff's department be based on the schedule that's been presented to us And any deviation from that schedule will have to come back to the committee for.
I'm having second thoughts now. I'm not sure that's an amendment so much as it is a different motion. So I'm gonna,
Okay.
that's, and I don't have well, corporation council's here, but I think that's a bridge too far. So unless he tells me I'm off, I'm gonna require a vote on this motion, and then we can, if it fails, if this motion should fail, we could take up a different motion.
That's fair enough.
That's more than. that's- All right, so if we're gonna go to a vote on this motion, we'll go to a vote on now. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So 3 opposed, motion fails. 2 in favor, 3 opposed, that motion fails. Is there another motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to allow the sheriff's department to begin the recruiting and training process based upon the schedule presented to us beginning in October of 23 and running through July of 25. If there's any deviation to the proposed schedule, then the sheriff would have to come back to the committee for approval.
Okay, is there a second? Supervisor Lukes, seconds. Is there discussion on this motion?
I think that by going to October 23, we're stretching out.
Well, this is what the sheriff is requesting.
Right, no, so this is solid.
You
This
mean
is what
October
he wants.
22.
Yeah,
Starting based on the schedule.
right, and we're gonna be starting
Starting
training. Yeah, so this is within the timeline.
It's based on the schedule that was given out, and that'll be entered into the minutes. So there will be no question. How's that? Further discussion? All right,
I just like it because then you know what to expect on an annual basis.
that's understandable. Sure. All in, no other, okay, no further discussion, or somebody flinched. Did you have further?
No,
did you
I
have-
seconded that.
Oh,
He was
okay.
asking who seconded.
Okay, I thought there was discussion and I didn't want to go to a vote if there were more questions. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, well,
Will that work?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Fine.
Same way of describing the tree, just a different way of describing
All
the
right.
same tree.
so I'm going to keep this moving and go on to discussion regarding administrators' hours of.
There's still B, Mr.
Oh,
Chairman.
I thought we're done with the sheriff's department for the night. All right.
I'll start them and turn it over to Jason. So again, what we just discussed, this is all relative, is that as we're gaining people, this has got to happen in short order from what we've been told by the jail administrator, our consultant, the architect, we have to get to create a transitional team. It has to be members of the current operational staff, right? To be able to basically separate from the line, separate from the shifts and park them just for the purpose of policy development, training, oversight in regards to literally the building of it. So that, and this has happened in other jails where all of a sudden, the builders, the concrete guys, they start working and you've got this transitional team saying, hey, wait a second, that door is not supposed to go that way. They understand the operation. So this is something that we have to have as part of this project. So what we have, and I'll turn it over to Jason, but what we want to make sure is that we're able to get these folks to be able to serve on these teams and not jeopardize their careers. Because that's ultimately, they're doing us a favor by getting on this team, and we need certain people on this team. But what we're asking them to do is basically put a hold on their careers. And for that, I'll turn it over to Jason.
So we want a mix of people, probably senior heavy from our jail to help out on this team, because they know the most senior people know the most about policies and the way jails work. We also have some individuals that came from other jails that bring a lot to the table. So we held interviews for this already, but one of the things that came up as we were talking through how this works, right now your most senior people in the jail are applying for this transitional team. They want to help out. They want this jail to open the correct way. But what's probably going to happen in the next 3 years is opportunities on patrol are going to come open. And if we ask them to stay on the transitional team and don't go to patrol, what'll happen is somebody will step in front of them. So somebody with less seniority will get in front of them. So for the rest of their career, maybe they'd be able to get days, but they can't get days because they helped us out by staying on the transitional team and somebody else jumped over them and went to patrol. So what we would like to do is temporarily authorize 3 additional union positions. And the reason 3 is because there's 3 people on the, and I know the notes say 2, but that was probably a
Misunderstanding on my end.
misunderstanding because of the way the motion was written from our committee. We don't know that we'll need 3. We might only need 2, and we're not gonna put any more on than what we need. But let's just say we have 3 people on that transitional team and an opening on patrol comes, and one of them applies and they're our top candidate. If we can make them a union position and then fill patrol with somebody with less seniority than them, they keep their position in that union. And someday they'll be able to go to patrol and they'll be able to bump that person and they'll be right back where they should be on seniority. So basically, just like we have one transitional officer now that works in the jail that we put to patrol from time to time, we want 3 additional of those officers. The only difference is they're in the union and they're holding their spot. We plan on getting rid of those transitional positions as soon as the jail is almost open and we know that we don't have to continue filling patrol positions, if that makes sense. So our intent is to create these positions so that people hold their place in the union, but then when the jail opens or shortly before it opens, we start getting rid of those positions based on attrition. When somebody retires, we'll just eliminate one at a time.
If I may give an example. So I am a long-serving jailer dispatcher at the sheriff's department. And I am now part of the transition team that is putting together policies and the like. And because of my seniority and my work history, I am essentially the next in line for when the next patrol position opens and becomes vacant. Well, if I'm looking what's in the best interest for me, I'm going to say, forget the transition team. You're going to lose that, and I'm now going to be part of patrol because I want to have the patrol position and the union membership that comes with that. So in that respect, that hurts the county because I am no longer part of that transition team, and my experiences has now been lost. If instead I can stay on the transition team, if I can stay on the transition team, but I have this temporary position that has secured my spot in patrol, that when we get more folks coming in afterwards and the transition has been done, I can go to my spot in the union and my temporary union position otherwise has now gone away.
Where's the cost savings?
Do we have something in writing to see how this would transpire?
Sure. Well, there would have to be, because we would have to do a letter to the union, basically saying to the union, look, temporarily, we're allowing these positions to have union membership. But once they now move to patrol, those special positions go away, except for the one that we've always had.
I think until we, I think we need to have something in writing to make a decision.
I'd have to have that.
That's my
in
feeling.
the union.
I mean, I'm not against it. I just think that we need to watch, if it's a union spot.
We've had that conversation with the union already, and they agreed that we should have it in writing. We plan on putting that in writing, that we plan on eliminating those positions.
Supervisor Romden?
So are you asking now for 3 more employees?
No. So this is 3 people that are currently working in the jail, most likely said senior, very knowledgeable, whatever. 3 people that are currently there that want to pull out for that transitional team. But because they're willing to assist us with the transitional team, we don't want to hinder their career, because what they're going to be doing by helping us, and all of a sudden patrol spot opens up, they're gonna skip it. They're gonna be like, no, I'm gonna stick with the trans, right? So what we're doing is we're just creating a placeholder that, hey, help us out, get us through the transitional team, and then you'll be able to fall back into sequence, at a future date.
In terms of the people that you're pulling into this transition team.
Yep.
Who's going to be doing the job they were doing before they went to the.
And that's what I was trying to explain about the worry about being heavy. We've got these new positions. They're gonna be filling that line and these folks are coming over. It's a part of the project. So we can't just make it up. We've got to pull these folks from line, have them dedicate to transitional team, and they'll be backfilled by these new employees. That's how that plays out. And what we're looking for is a placeholder so that they're not hindering or shunting their own career future by helping us in this transitional team. So that, you talk about the win-win, it's a win for the county because we're gonna have qualified senior people able to help us through this transition. The win for them is they're not losing their place in line once they get out of
So
patrol.
is this transition period going to take 3 years?
They tell us, they recommend that as soon as I think they start digging, that's when they want that transitional team pulled in place.
And exactly what is this transitional team going to be doing?
That's where they're doing all the policy development. They're gonna be coordinating all the training, because working in that building is gonna look a lot different than working in that building. And so that's all gonna be trained up, and there's gotta be entirely new policy developed for that building. That's also going to be, again, actually not supervising, but overseeing as the construction's going on, making sure that their knowledge of operations, they're like, wait a second, that's not supposed to be there, or we need this to change before it results in change orders, right? We want to keep them on the front. So all of a sudden we don't go to open the doors like, what the heck is this? And now we're into doing workarounds. So that part of their job is maintaining effectiveness, for that structure as it's being built.
So when do you think that that team will start?
I don't know, what are they talking for dirt?
June of next year.
I think I have it there
That's
as,
what the schedule is.
I have a line which says break ground right there on that thing.
June of
Oh,
next year.
yeah.
June of 20.
All right. Is there a motion?
Well, the motion would be they're gonna bring back paperwork, correct?
Okay.
Well, you don't even have to do a motion then.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll be back on for next month.
Yep.
Okay, moving on, discussion regarding administrators' hours of work, possible action. So where this comes from, I've gotten a lot of people just kind of worked up or questions, concerns about whether the administrator is going to be working 2 days a week, Mondays and Tuesdays for Luxembourg, for the village of Luxembourg during regular work hours. And so, I don't remember too many issues where I've gotten more blowback, I guess. And so I had suggested, I checked with Mr. Defo, and I suggested, well, talking to people, I said, well, it could be simple as, the executive committee simply says, the administrator cannot work for any other entity during regular work hours. But up to this committee, I guess, whether you feel we need to take it up or not. We did have the points to the village, that I thought were pretty clear. So, not concerns if the executive committee doesn't feel they want to do anything. Okay. So that would be the, that's the origination.
Isn't it kind of like saying that my company seemed to be, I can't work for the county during regular work hours? I mean,
Your company?
my company.
That's a
would say
little
to me,
different. That's
I
a little
can't-
different. I think what your company would be saying is you can't go and work for, what's another trash company, Harders, the one in the village. You can't
Actually,
go
we
and
do-
work for
we-
Harders.
We do
You
work
can't,
for her.
you can't,
So, I mean, what's the difference?
oh, okay, so you can work for two companies at the same time.
We do. Actually. we
So
do
we're
work
okay.
for- we do
So we're
work for
okay,
3 or
so we'd
4
be okay
companies.
if, okay,
Yeah,
so
but I
Todd,
mean,
so Todd
it's-
Every could go to work for, Spartan Construction a couple days a week.
Oh, heavens, no, that would be full of concrete work, and man, I did that,
Okay.
I ain't touching that shit again.
All right. So. All right, well, I mean, I guess you're saying,
I'll just
you're saying then that you're okay if the administrator is working for the village of Luxembourg during regular work hours.
I defined work, I mean, Dan, you and I mean, you work for someone else, I work for myself. And as long as the administrator is doing his job that he's hired to do. If he's approached with a question from the village of Luxembourg, and he can do it without any big involvement of ours, I wouldn't have a problem.
Big involvement of ours equals what?
I don't know, because there's duplicate jobs that you can do as an administrator here and assisting the village of Luxembourg. There's so many things that in government, that are cross each other. As long as we get our 40 hours worth, I think we should.
40 hours? That's our expectation of a salaried administrator?
That would be my expectation, yeah.
Really? Okay. That's the committee's expectation, then I will, I
I mean,
will
I-
simply
I'll,
let
I'll
people
say,
know that
I'll say
this.
my part. I got numerous phone calls from people all the way up into basically the Door County Board members saying that basically taxpayer dollars should be putting in an honest 40 hours. And I'm not saying you're not, Scott, but that's the rumor that's out there, and that's what they're giving me as far as information, that we need to get to 40 hours because it's taxpayer dollars and expected to be here. So that's what I do.
So the question that you need to ask yourselves is, do you think I put in the time? And if you don't, then don't.
I have no idea because I'm never around here. I couldn't answer that.
Well, I mean, so, the concern that's being expressed to me, I think it's all rumor. I don't. Is, the administrator, or the questions being put to me, this is from supervisors that aren't on executive committee. Well, so if he puts in 40 hours, Monday through Thursday morning, or Monday through Wednesday, he could he could be over at the village hall Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. My response was, that's not my understanding of it.
Comment came back from supervisors right here, our county board supervisors, that we here as a committee aren't doing our job. So
Not doing our job by what?
by allowing this to happen.
I was at a fire meeting last, and I don't know if it's true or not, but by a village board member and said that it's not gonna happen, so I don't know, maybe he's wrong.
What I've said is this, and I said this to the chair, and I'll say this to you. If there's that much heartburn, I don't need to do this. The whole purpose was that I felt there was an opportunity to help both the village and help the county. And again, from my standpoint, bias as it is, because it's my standpoint, is that, do I think I can handle both jobs? Absolutely. I was able to do both human services director and this position and do both of them fairly successfully. If the question is specifically and totally about the number of hours, then that's a completely different metric than am I getting the goals and the goals of the county and the projects done that we want as the county. If it's about the physical presence and that respect, then okay, fine. Whatever the committee and the board wants is fine. The question that just needs to be asked is, if you don't think that I can do both and that I can do both and still do my job well, then absolutely. If there's that question, then there's no reason for me to do it.
And I'm only being honest to what I've been here.
I
mean,
I understand. And again, it comes down to that whole part of, okay, and this kind of goes to the larger standpoint, because in many ways, the chairman's right. I don't think, at least I hope, I don't believe that there's a person at this table that doesn't think that I work more than 40 hours a week. Now, I may not be in the office per se 40 hours a week or over 40 hours a week, but I definitely put a lot of time and effort, whether I'm at home or on the weekend or otherwise. But the question comes down to, and the belief has to be, and it is whatever it is if the belief is that I cannot handle both positions without being in the office in the county 40 hours or Monday through Friday, then it's not worth the hassle. It's disappointing, but it's not worth the hassle.
Question for our legal counsel. Can this committee or this county board tell Scott he can't work anywhere else besides the county?
We put during regular hours. I mean, that's the real heartburn I'm hearing. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of blowback on this, but
I haven't heard a word.
I haven't heard anything.
I've heard plenty, and the idea, people are saying, are you mean to tell me? I mean, he could be, Monday and Tuesday over working for the village and, I mean, so this committee can certainly set the expectations and say, you're not working someplace else during regular hours. I mean, my understanding is this is kind of a consultant type thing, outside of regular hours. Or we could take it and have it discussed in front of the full board, I suppose. I mean, yes, it's executive
And
committee.
I don't know the history, I haven't been able to talk to Mr. Seidel or,
Oh, yeah,
is the village of Luxembourg, if they need a
Yeah,
part-time
why can't
administrator,
they-
why don't they hire one?
Well, why can't they hire a full-time one without raising
okay.
taxes? I mean, the property taxes over there are ludicrous. They raised them 69.5%
I hear
the
you.
levy. I mean, it's, and you have Kewaunee, you have Algoma, they have full-time administrators and yet have taxes that are much lower when you look at the property values and so forth. So, yeah, I get that. There's obviously, they have something, some kind of an issue with that. I don't know why, but that's the issue. I mean, you want to leave it?
What is like with the sheriff? I mean, he's gone for periods of time
Oh, yeah.
and he's salaried, maybe he's an elected official. Does that make it different?
As an elected official, and I'll say it this way and I'll take it to the extreme. And let's not even go with the sheriff. If the county clerk was elected and decided never to come into the office, that's okay. Why? Because the person that determines whether they have a job or not is basically the people of the county,
The elected official can do anything.
pretty much.
I mean, unless the voters choose to turn him out. So that's
So they don't have to get permission.
within the limits of the law.
No, they
They don't
don't.
have to get permission. No.
No.
Elected official, I mean, it's up to the voters to determine that, kind
Correct.
of like it is with you. You could
So-
never show up to a meeting. I mean,
So what it really comes down to for the committee is what is your comfort? And again, whatever you decide is whatever you decide. Is what is your comfort? Does the committee or the board believe that I can do both jobs? Or let me change that. Do they believe that I can still do my job more than adequately while still having this other responsibility? That's what it really comes down to, because if you don't think that I can,
I don't
Okay.
think that is. I disagree. I don't think that's what it comes down to. I think it's an issue of, what you do on your own time outside of regular hours is up to you. I think the question is whether or not during regular hours, a person should be, working for any other entity. I mean, now Supervisor Mastler has said that would be fine, right?
I don't have.
but there is a slight difference between salary and hourly,
There
Mr.
is
Chair.
indeed.
So
There's
in
a
that
dramatic
respect, when you
difference.
talk about that,
Right.
the same rules don't necessarily apply.
Well, the rules, they do to some extent, because there is an expectation that under normal circumstances, during regular hours, a salaried person is going to be serving the employers that they have been hired by. Because your position is one where you would never run out of work. I mean, you could work around the clock and never finish it, right?
That I kind of do that already.
Well,
Not quite, but
Well, there you are. It never runs out. So when so I think an employer, I think there is an issue of working elsewhere during regular hours.
The part I would worry about is if the village has expectations that there's a lot more to it than what you think coming in, then your workload
the
is.
creep of which that's where what I had said to Luxembourg is if this were to happen, it has to be very clear as to what the expectations are. Because as you said, Supervisor Lutz, is that depending, there could be creep, or if there is no expectation, then there could also be the accusation that I'm pocketing money and I'm not doing anything.
Does the committee have any desire to take this up? You happy to leave it the way it is and let him just, do whatever? Supervisor Mastler says he's fine if he's working elsewhere during regular hours. you know, committee needs to make a decision.
I think for regular business hours, he should be focused on the county.
I mean, do you wish to have a motion? Do you wish to just leave it at, you know, that?
Well, say he would run for a village trustee, get on the board. That position alone can run into regular work hours, like I'm chairman of a town. That runs into my normal work hours. And yet the work is getting done, the work is getting done.
Okay, so
And
you're,
he's basically,
so you're with Supervisor Masteler and you're fine if he's working over at the
Because-
village hall during regular hours.
because I do 2, 3 different things.
Well, I'm a town chairman. I know if I get a message on my phone and when I'm at work, I make a call on my break. Occasionally when there's snowstorms, yeah. I make
So
calls.
Supervisor Yaki, you're okay if he's working, you know, if he's over at the village hall during.
Not during regular work hours. He's
Well,
expected to be here if I come to see him.
So you expect him to be here during regular hours?
Yeah, but he can.
Yeah, I
do
mean,
a quick
answer a call.
email or a
that's something.
call or-
I don't know what regular hours are, but I'm, in my mind, I'm saying 8 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon, or 7:30 to 4, or some defined schedule, Monday through Friday.
What the
What you
typical
do after 5 at night and on Saturday and Sunday is up to you,
All right, so
unless
what do
it's a
we,
special meeting.
what do we want to do with this then? I mean, is, do you want a motion or do you just want to, you've given your expectations?
Is there something in the minutes?
It wouldn't be, not without a motion.
Well, no, I can put, if the committee were to direct, then that would be in the minutes. And if the committee were to direct as the administrator, you've directed me to do something. I don't necessarily need a motion. I think then if you're saying 8 to 4:30, you need to be in the office, or from 8 to 4:30, you need to be working for the county. I'll say it that way. Is if that's what you're saying, then
Regular.
message received.
Regular hours.
That's something you can direct.
Well, the committee would direct.
Committee would direct. So I mean, yeah, I mean, if that's the consensus, I mean, you could make it very simple. You could simply make a motion that the administrator will, you know, be working for the county during regular hours. Although that seems a strange motion because it should be pretty evident. You hire a person to a position. I don't know why that would need to be.
Right, that's why I suggested that, you know, it just comes.
I think it's pretty clear that the consensus of the committee is that the administrator should not be working elsewhere during regular hours. And if he does, then that's something the committee will take up at a future date. How's that? Simple enough, clear enough?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Our next meeting then would be November 7th at 6 o'clock, right?
I will,
Oh,
unless you guys want to come back to let me, I won't be.
Oh, can I?
I'm coming back from Branson on the 7th.
Oh, man.
Probably around 6
We're
o'clock.
gonna Zoom the meeting. We're all gonna be in
Hey,
Branson.
I'm going.
Supervisor Masteler's taking us all.
Budget, I'm gonna have, no.
Supervisor Masteler is taking us all to Branson?
I'm going on
I
a
didn't
bus.
say I was taking you. You can ride in the
Oh.
back. I'll take you, but you're paying your own way once you get there. Yeah, it won't cost you no gas, won't cost you nothing else.
Besides Supervisor Masteler and his being at the Lawrence Welk Theater on that day, who else does this not work for? Anybody?
Me.
Well, do we want to go through trying to switch it again? I mean, it's the first Monday of the month. I think we
We
should
have
leave it.
2 other supervisors that we don't know what their
Well,
schedules may
They
be
didn't
either.
make this because we changed it seems so. I would say we leave it and whoever makes it makes it.
I possibly could hear, I'm coming home on a bus that night. I'm assuming.
We'll have them drop you at the door here.
Could be.
Enjoy yourself at the Lawrence Welk Theater.
I make
All right.
a motion to adjourn.
Motion to